A black lawyer wins case for a racist white woman after she files a complaint to the police against him. Derek Lawson had seen a lot in his years as a lawyer. He had navigated the complexities of the legal system, fought for justice in a world that often felt stacked against him, and stood up for those who felt powerless. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened that chilly Thursday afternoon. The phone rang incessantly on his desk, an annoying sound that gnawed at his concentration. Derek glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It was the precinct. He picked up, his heart racing as he answered. Derek Lawson. Mr. Lawson, this is Officer Jenkins from the Riverdale Police Department. We need you to come down to the station. There's been an allegation made against you. Derek felt his stomach drop. What kind of allegation? Assault. A woman named Margaret Davis has filed a complaint, Officer Jenkins replied, his tone matter-of-fact. Derek's mind raced. Margaret Davis, Maggie, was a local businesswoman known for her outspoken views on race. He had crossed paths with her during a community meeting where she had made some inflammatory remarks about the neighborhood's demographic changes. They had clashed, but Derek had thought nothing more of it. Now he was the target of her accusations. Are you serious? Derek asked, trying to keep his voice steady. This is a mistake. I haven't assaulted anyone. Please come down to the station. We need to take your statement, Officer Jenkins insisted. The line went dead, but Derek's mind was still spinning. Why would Maggie make such a claim? He had never laid a hand on her. Their argument had been heated, but nothing beyond words. He felt a rush of anger mixed with disbelief. The system was supposed to protect the innocent, and yet here he was, a black man accused by a white woman, a scenario that had played out all too often in America. As Derek drove to the precinct, he replayed the events in his mind. The community meeting had been tense. Maggie had ranted about how the neighborhood was going to hell because of the influx of black families. Derek had stood up, challenging her views, pointing out the benefits of diversity and the importance of inclusivity. It had been a passionate exchange, but now it felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. Upon arrival, Derek was greeted by a heavy atmosphere. The precinct was bustling with officers and civilians, but he felt a sense of isolation as he approached the front desk. Officer Jenkins appeared shortly after, a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Lawson, I'll take you to the interview room. Derek nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. As they walked through the precinct, he noticed the eyes of the officers on him, some filled with curiosity, others with skepticism. He knew he had to remain composed. Any sign of weakness could be weaponized against him. Once inside the interview room, Derek sat down at the small table, his heart pounding. The room was stark, with white walls and a single flickering light overhead. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself as Officer Jenkins began to explain the situation. Ms. Davis claims that you assaulted her after your argument at the community meeting. She alleges that you threatened her and that she felt physically intimidated, Jenkins stated, his voice steady. Derek clenched his fists, the accusation infuriating him. I did not assault her. We had a heated discussion, but I never threatened her. She's twisting the truth. I understand, but we need to document your side of the story, Jenkins replied, his tone neutral. Can you tell me what happened? Derek recounted the events of the meeting, carefully articulating every detail. He described how Maggie had launched into her tirade and how he had countered her points with facts and logic. He was passionate, but at no point did he raise his voice or threaten her. Officer Jenkins listened attentively, nodding at the appropriate moments. As Derek spoke, he could feel his pulse quicken. He was a lawyer, trained to argue and defend, yet here he was, fighting for his name against an unfounded accusation. The gravity of the situation began to sink in as he considered the implications. A wrongful charge could ruin his career, and the community he had fought so hard to serve might turn against him. Do you know why she would make such an allegation? Jenkins asked, raising an eyebrow. Derek hesitated, weighing his words. Maggie has always been vocal about her views on race. She's not exactly a fan of people like me moving into the neighborhood. Perhaps she thought making this claim would scare me into silence. Jenkins nodded, scribbling notes. We'll need to speak with her as well. This isn't the first time she's made complaints about someone, but we want to ensure everything is documented. As the interview concluded, Derek felt a mix of relief and anxiety. He had told his side of the story, but he knew how easily perceptions could shift. The world was often unfair, and he was acutely aware of the biases that existed within the very system he had dedicated his life to. After leaving the precinct, Derek spent the next few days in a haze of disbelief. News of the incident spread quickly through the community. Friends and colleagues reached out, concerned but unsure of what to say. Derek felt the weight of their inquiries and the judgment that accompanied them. He had always prided himself on being a pillar of the community, yet here he was, on the defensive. Derek decided to confront Maggie directly. If she was going to accuse him, he wanted to hear it from her lips. He found her at her boutique, surrounded by racks of clothes, her demeanor as haughty as ever. The moment she saw him, her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and something else, perhaps guilt. "Maggie," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We need to talk." "What are you doing here, Derek?" she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. "I'm here to understand why you decided to file a complaint against me." "You know it's not true," he replied, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. Maggie waved her hand dismissively. "You think you can come in here and intimidate me? You don't scare me." Derek felt his patience wane. "I'm not trying to intimidate you, Maggie. I'm trying to understand why you would lie. You know I didn't assault you." "Maybe I wanted to teach you a lesson about your place in this community," she shot back, her voice rising. "You think you can just come in here and change everything? You don't belong here." The words stung and Derek clenched his jaw. "This isn't about belonging. It's about truth and accountability. I've always respected you, but this is unacceptable." Maggie glared at him, her expression a mix of anger and defiance. "You think you can win everyone over with your charm? You don't understand people like me." Derek took a step back, feeling his heart race. "I thought I did. But clearly you're blinded by your prejudices. If you want to play this game, fine. I'll take you to court." Maggie's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Derek thought he meant fear flicker across her face. "You wouldn't dare." "I absolutely would," Derek replied, his voice firm. "You think you can ruin my life with a lie? I won't stand for it." With that, Derek turned and walked out of the boutique, determination fueling his every step. He knew he had to take action, to fight back against the injustice that threatened to consume him. He would represent himself in the defamation case, not just to clear his name, but to expose the truth behind Maggie's prejudice. As he drove away, Derek felt a fire ignite within him. He would not be silenced, and he would not allow Maggie's hatred to dictate his future. This was just the beginning, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Derek Lawson felt a surge of adrenaline as he drove away from Maggie's boutique. This was no longer just about clearing his name. It was a battle against systemic prejudice that he had witnessed time and again throughout his career. He parked his car outside his office, a modest space that reflected his dedication to serving the community. Derek took a moment to collect himself before stepping inside, ready to formulate a plan. As he entered, his assistant Kayla looked up from her desk, concern etched across her face. "Derek, I heard about the incident. Are you okay?" Derek forced a smile, though the weight of the situation hung heavily on him. "I'm fine, just a minor setback. I'm going to take this to court." Kayla's eyes widened. "You're serious? You're going to represent yourself?" "Yeah, I am," Derek replied, his resolve strengthening. "If she thinks she can tarnish my reputation with lies, I'll make sure the truth comes out." Kayla nodded, her expression shifting from concern to admiration. "I'll help you with whatever you need. You can't let her get away with this." With a plan forming in his mind, Derek spent the next few hours poring over legal documents, gathering evidence, and researching Maggie's background. He knew he needed more than just his word against hers. He needed to demonstrate a pattern of behavior that exposed her prejudices. As he sifted through old news articles and community records, a sense of purpose washed over him. This would be his chance to shine a light on the issues that plagued their community. The following days were a blur of preparation. Derek reached out to former acquaintances of Maggie's, gathering testimonies that painted a picture of her character. He learned that she had a history of making false accusations against people who challenged her views. Each new piece of evidence fueled his determination, and he felt the weight of responsibility for others who had suffered under her prejudice. This was about more than just his own reputation. It was about justice for everyone who had faced discrimination. As the trial date approached, Derek could feel the tension in the air. News of the case had spread, and he was both anxious and invigorated by the thought of standing up to Maggie in court. The community was divided, with some supporting him while others took Maggie's side, believing her accusations without question. Derek was prepared for the backlash. He had faced adversity before, and he knew that the truth was on his side. On the day of the trial, Derek arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in a crisp suit that exuded confidence. The building loomed before him, a symbol of justice and authority. As he walked through the halls, he could feel the eyes of onlookers on him, whispers trailing in his wake. Derek steeled himself for the battle ahead, reminding himself of the importance of his mission. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Derek took a deep breath as he approached the plaintiff's table, where Maggie sat, her demeanor calm but her eyes betraying a flicker of anxiety. She was flanked by her attorney, a slick, seasoned lawyer who seemed confident in her ability to sway the jury. Derek felt a rush of adrenaline as he recalled their last confrontation. This time, he would be prepared. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Derek's heart raced as he listened to the opening statements. Maggie's attorney painted a picture of Derek as an aggressive individual who had threatened Maggie during their argument. Derek fought to contain his anger, knowing that he had to remain composed. This was a game of strategy and intellect, not emotion. When it was finally Derek's turn to speak, he rose from his seat, adjusting his tie as he approached the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. I stand before you not just to defend my name, but to shed light on the truth," he began, his voice steady. "Maggie Davis has made a serious allegation against me, one that has the potential to ruin my career and my life. But I assure you, the truth is far more complex than her version of events." Derek then recounted the events leading up to the accusation, carefully selecting his words to highlight Maggie's history of prejudice and manipulation. He presented evidence of her previous complaints against others, each one illustrating her pattern of behavior. The jury listened intently, and Derek felt a surge of confidence as he saw some nodding in agreement. As he continued, Derek brought in witnesses who had encountered Maggie's prejudices firsthand. A neighbor testified about Maggie's disdain for the changing demographics of the neighborhood, recounting how she had openly expressed her belief that people like Derek did not belong there. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of who Maggie truly was, and Derek could sense the tide shifting in his favor. Maggie's attorney, realizing the momentum was turning, tried to discredit the witnesses, but Derek stood firm. He had prepared for this moment, and he refused to let Maggie's privilege shield her from accountability. "This isn't just about me," Derek stated passionately, his voice rising. "This is about all of us who have fought against the discrimination that has plagued our community for far too long." The climax of the trial came when Derek decided to confront Maggie directly. He stood before her, the courtroom silent as he locked eyes with her. "Maggie, you accused me of assault because I challenged your views. You thought you could silence me with your words. But here we are. I'm not afraid of you, and I won't let you bully me or anyone else into submission." Maggie's expression shifted from defiance to something more vulnerable, and for a brief moment, Derek saw a flicker of regret. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a steely resolve. "You're playing a dangerous game, Derek. You don't know what you're getting into." "I know exactly what I'm getting into," Derek replied, his voice steady. "I'm standing up for what's right, and one way or another, the truth will come out." With that, Derek returned to his seat, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The jury had witnessed the truth unfold before them, and he could only hope that they understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about one man's reputation. It was about the very fabric of their community. As the trial adjourned for the day, Derek walked out of the courtroom with a renewed sense of purpose. He had fought for the truth, and regardless of the outcome, he knew he had made his voice heard. The battle was far from over, but he was ready to face whatever came next. The days following the initial court proceedings were a whirlwind for Derek Lawson. As the case against Maggie Davis gained momentum, the public scrutiny intensified, and Derek found himself navigating a minefield of criticism and skepticism. The local media had picked up on the story, and it wasn't long before Derek's face was splashed across the news, his name associated with the scandal. Suddenly, he was the center of attention, with everyone in the community weighing in on the case. Some praised him for standing up to Maggie's prejudice, while others accused him of fabricating the truth to save his own reputation. Derek tried to maintain a calm and composed demeanor, but the weight of the situation was taking its toll. He had spent countless hours preparing for the trial, meticulously gathering evidence and lining up witnesses. Now he had to contend with the court of public opinion, a battlefield that was far more unpredictable and volatile. As he walked through the streets, Derek could feel the eyes of his neighbors following him, their whispers and sideways glances a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. He had always prided himself on being a respected member of the community, but now he felt like an outsider, a target of suspicion and mistrust. Kendall, Derek's longtime friend and trusted confidant, could see the strain on his face. "Dude, you look exhausted. How are you holding up?" Derek sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's been a nightmare, Kendall. I feel like I'm constantly on the defensive, and the pressure just keeps mounting." Kendall placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I can't even imagine what you're going through, but you know you have my full support, right? We're in this together." Derek nodded, grateful for his friend's unwavering loyalty. "I appreciate that, Kendall, but I can't help but wonder if I'm doing the right thing. What if I'm just making things worse?" "Hey, don't even think that way," Kendall replied firmly. "You're standing up for what's right, and that's never the wrong thing to do. Maggie needs to be held accountable, and you're the one who can make that happen." Derek took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "You're right. I can't back down now, not when I've come this far. But I just hope the jury can see the truth, you know? I don't want this to be a lost cause." Kendall smiled reassuringly. "They will, Derek. You've got the facts on your side, and you've got the community behind you. Just keep being the strong, principled guy I know you are." As Derek continued his preparations for the trial, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was mounting with each passing day. He knew that he couldn't afford to make a single misstep, not when Maggie's reputation and his own were on the line. One evening, as Derek pored over the case files, his phone rang. It was the precinct, and his heart sank as he answered. "Hello? Mr. Lawson, this is Officer Jenkins. We need you to come down to the station again. There's been a new development in the case." Derek felt a knot form in the pit of his stomach. "What kind of development?" "Maggie Davis has filed an additional complaint against you. She's claiming harassment," Jenkins replied, his tone grave. Derek's mind raced as he processed the information. "Harassment? But I haven't done anything to her." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Lawson, but we need to document this new allegation. Please come down to the station as soon as possible," Jenkins insisted. Derek hung up the phone, his hands trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. Maggie was clearly escalating her efforts to discredit him, and he knew that he had to tread carefully. The last thing he needed was another false accusation to deal with. As he made his way to the precinct, Derek couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. He had come so far, and he couldn't afford to let Maggie's tactics derail his case. He had to remain focused, to keep his cool in the face of her relentless attacks. When he arrived at the station, Officer Jenkins greeted him with a somber expression. "Mr. Lawson, I'm afraid we need to take your statement regarding the new harassment, allegation." Derek nodded, his jaw clenched. "Of course. Let's get this over with." The interview room felt stifling, the air thick with tension. Derek recounted his interactions with Maggie, emphasizing that he had not engaged in any form of harassment. He explained that he had simply been preparing for the trial, gathering evidence and speaking with potential witnesses. The officer listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. As the interview concluded, Derek felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The constant barrage of accusations was taking a toll, and he knew that he needed to find a way to regain control of the narrative. "Officer Jenkins, I need to know, is this new allegation going to affect the trial?" Derek asked, his voice laced with concern. Jenkins shook his head. "I can't say for certain, but it's certainly not going to help your case. The judge will have to decide how to proceed." Derek sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm doing everything I can to tell the truth, but it feels like Maggie is determined to bury me." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Lawson," Jenkins replied, his tone sympathetic. "But the best thing you can do is to continue presenting the facts. The truth will come out one way or another. Derek nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach. He had come too far to let Maggie's tactics derail him, but the path ahead was becoming increasingly treacherous. As he left the precinct, Derek couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The stakes had just been raised, and he knew that he couldn't afford to make a single misstep. The battle lines had been drawn, and he was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The harassment allegation hung over Derek Lawson like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow the progress he'd made in his defamation case against Maggie Davis. The media frenzy intensified, painting him as a volatile figure, further fueling the doubts of those who already questioned his integrity. The pressure was relentless, testing the limits of his resilience. He felt the sting of betrayal from community members who had once supported him, now swayed by the manipulative narrative spun by Maggie and her legal team. Sleep became a luxury he could barely afford, his nights consumed by strategizing and preparing for the upcoming trial. Derek knew he couldn't afford to let the new allegation distract him. He doubled down on his efforts, meticulously reviewing every piece of evidence, strengthening his defense against Maggie's relentless attacks. He met with Kayla, his assistant, whose unwavering support was a lifeline in the storm. They discussed strategies, analyzed witness testimonies, and prepared for every possible scenario Maggie's lawyer might throw at them. "We need to find something concrete to counter this harassment claim," Derek said, pacing his office restlessly. "Something that proves Maggie's motive." Kayla, ever resourceful, nodded. "I've been digging into Maggie's past. There have been whispers about her business practices, some shady dealings that might be relevant." Derek's eyes lit up. Anything that shows a pattern of manipulation or vindictiveness could be crucial. "We need to expose her true character to the jury." Kayla spent the next few days tirelessly researching Maggie's business dealings, uncovering a series of questionable transactions and disgruntled former employees. She discovered that Maggie had a history of using intimidation tactics to silence those who crossed her, a pattern that mirrored her current actions against Derek. This discovery was a game-changer, providing Derek with the ammunition he needed to fight back. As the trial date drew closer, Derek focused on strengthening his witness testimonies. He met with each witness individually, preparing them for the intense cross-examination they would face from Maggie's lawyer. He emphasized the importance of remaining calm and composed under pressure, reminding them that their words could be the key to exposing Maggie's lies. One witness, a former employee of Maggie's named Sarah Miller, was particularly nervous. She had witnessed Maggie's discriminatory behavior firsthand and was hesitant to testify, fearing retaliation. Derek reassured her, reminding her of the importance of speaking truth to power. "Sarah, your testimony is crucial," Derek said gently. "Maggie needs to be held accountable for her actions, and your voice can make a difference." Sarah took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. "You're right, Derek. I can't let fear silence me. I'll testify." With Sarah's commitment, Derek felt a surge of hope. He knew that her testimony, combined with the evidence Kayla had uncovered, could be the turning point in the trial. He had a strong case, and he was determined to present it with conviction and clarity. The day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Derek entered, his demeanor calm and collected, despite the turmoil within. He could feel the weight of the community's expectations, the hope that he would prevail against Maggie's insidious tactics. He took his place at the plaintiff's table, his gaze fixed on Maggie, who sat across from him, a mask of indifference concealing her anxiety. The trial began, and the tension in the room was palpable. Maggie's lawyer, a seasoned veteran of the courtroom, launched into a scathing attack on Derek's character, attempting to portray him as an opportunistic individual seeking to exploit Maggie's reputation for personal gain. Derek listened patiently, refusing to rise to the bait. He knew that his composure was his greatest weapon. When it was his turn to present his case, Derek rose to his feet, his voice resonating with confidence. He methodically laid out the evidence, highlighting Maggie's history of discriminatory behavior and her pattern of making false accusations. He called Sarah Miller to the stand, and her powerful testimony captivated the courtroom, detailing Maggie's manipulative tactics and the hostile work environment she created for her employees. Maggie's lawyer attempted to discredit Sarah's testimony, but Derek was prepared. He presented evidence of Maggie's shady business dealings, revealing a pattern of intimidation and deceit that corroborated Sarah's claims. The jury listened intently, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief as the truth about Maggie's character began to unravel. As the trial progressed, the momentum shifted decisively in Derek's favor. The evidence was overwhelming, and Maggie's attempts to defend herself grew increasingly desperate. The community, once divided, began to rally behind Derek, recognizing the courage it took to stand up to Maggie's power and influence. Derek felt a surge of hope as he watched the jury deliberate. He had fought tirelessly to expose the truth, and he knew that he had presented a compelling case. Now, all he could do was wait, hoping that justice would prevail. The tension in the courtroom was almost unbearable, the silence broken only by the occasional cough or shuffle of feet. Derek closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, steeling himself for the verdict. His future, his reputation, and the fate of the community hung in the balance. The air in the courtroom crackled with anticipation as the jury filed back in, their faces inscrutable. Derek Lawson sat at the plaintiff's table, his heart pounding against his ribs, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He'd laid bare Maggie Davis's prejudice, her history of manipulation, and her blatant lies, but the outcome remained uncertain. He glanced at Maggie, who sat across from him, her expression a mask of composure, though a flicker of unease betrayed her carefully constructed facade. The judge addressed the jury, his voice echoing in the hushed courtroom. "Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" The foreman, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, rose and nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." She handed the verdict slip to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. A hush fell over the room as the judge unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the document. Derek held his breath, the silence stretching into an eternity. The judge cleared his throat, and Derek's heart leaped into his throat. "In the case of Lawson versus Davis," the judge announced, his voice clear and resonant, "the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff, Derek Lawson." A wave of relief washed over Derek, so potent it almost brought him to his knees. He exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his body as a murmur rippled through the courtroom. He glanced at Kayla, who beamed at him, her eyes shining with pride. He had won. He had exposed Maggie's lies and cleared his name. But even in victory, a sense of unease lingered. The fight had taken its toll, leaving him emotionally drained and uncertain of the future. Maggie's composure finally cracked, her face contorting in disbelief and anger. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, whispering words of consolation, but the damage was done. Her reputation was tarnished, her carefully constructed world shattered. The community had witnessed her true character, and there was no going back. As the courtroom emptied, Derek was surrounded by reporters, their microphones thrust in his face, their questions a barrage of inquiries about his feelings, his plans, and the impact of the verdict. He answered their questions with measured responses, grateful for the vindication but wary of the spotlight. He knew that the media attention would eventually fade, but the impact of the trial would linger, shaping his career and his relationship with the community. Later that evening, Derek sat in his office, the silence a welcome reprieve from the chaos of the courtroom. He leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks. The trial had been a grueling experience, testing his limits both personally and professionally. He had faced public scrutiny, endured personal attacks, and questioned his own choices. But in the end, he had emerged victorious, his integrity intact. Kayla entered his office, a celebratory bottle of champagne in hand. "We did it, Derek," she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. "You were amazing in court. Maggie never stood a chance." Derek smiled, grateful for Kayla's unwavering support. "We did it, Kayla, but it wasn't easy." "No, it wasn't," Kayla agreed, popping the cork on the champagne. "But you never gave up. You fought for what was right, and you won." They toasted their victory, the bubbly liquid a symbol of their shared triumph. But as the celebration subsided, a sense of melancholy settled over Derek. The trial had exposed the deep-seated prejudices that existed within their community, and he knew that the fight for equality was far from over. "What's next, Derek?" Kayla asked, her voice laced with curiosity. Derek sighed, his gaze drifting towards the window. "I don't know, Kayla. I need some time to think. This whole experience has been eye-opening." You deserve a break, Kayla said softly. You've been through a lot. Derek nodded, his mind still racing with thoughts about the trial and its implications. He had won the legal battle, but the war against prejudice continued. He knew that he couldn't simply walk away, that he had a responsibility to use his platform to advocate for change. But he also needed time to heal, to process the emotional toll the trial had taken on him. The following days were a blur of interviews, public appearances, and community events. Derek became a reluctant symbol of resilience and justice, his story inspiring others to speak out against discrimination. He received countless messages of support from people who had faced similar struggles, their words a testament to the power of his victory. However, amidst the accolades and praise, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had exposed Maggie's lies and cleared his name, but he hadn't truly addressed the root cause of the conflict. He had won the battle, but the war against prejudice continued to rage. He longed for a deeper sense of resolution, a way to move forward that acknowledged the complexities of the situation and offered a path towards healing and understanding. One afternoon, as Derek sat in his office, contemplating his next move, he received an unexpected phone call. It was Maggie Davis. He hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest, before answering. "Hello? Derek, it's Maggie," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "Can we talk?" Derek was taken aback. He hadn't spoken to Maggie since the trial, and he wasn't sure what to expect. "What do you want, Maggie?" I need to apologize," she stammered, her voice laced with emotion. "I was wrong. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I said things I shouldn't have." Derek listened in silence, unsure how to respond. He had expected anger, defiance, even hostility, but not this. Maggie's apology, though unexpected, felt genuine, and it sparked a flicker of hope within him. Perhaps this was the opportunity he had been searching for, a chance to move beyond the animosity and work towards a more meaningful resolution. "Maggie," Derek began, choosing his words carefully, "your apology, it's unexpected." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But I appreciate you reaching out." "I know I've caused you a lot of pain, Derek," Maggie continued, her voice trembling slightly, "and I want to make things right. I want to understand why I acted the way I did, and I want to learn from my mistakes." Derek listened intently, a mix of skepticism and curiosity swirling within him. Could Maggie truly be sincere in her desire to change? Or was this just another manipulation tactic, a way to salvage her tarnished reputation? "I'm not sure what to say, Maggie," Derek admitted. "I've been so focused on fighting your accusations, on proving my innocence, that I haven't had time to process everything that's happened." "I understand," Maggie replied softly, "and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I hope that in time we can find a way to move forward, to heal the wounds that have been created." Derek took a deep breath, considering her words. He had spent so much energy fighting against Maggie's prejudice, and now she was offering him an olive branch. He wasn't sure if he was ready to accept it, but he knew that he couldn't simply dismiss her apology. "Maggie, I need some time to think about this," Derek said finally. "This whole situation has been incredibly difficult, and I need to process everything before I can decide how to move forward." "I understand," Maggie replied. "Just, please, consider it. I truly want to make amends." They ended the call and Derek sat in silence for a long moment, his mind racing. Maggie's apology had thrown him off balance, disrupting the narrative he had constructed in his mind. He had seen her as the antagonist, the embodiment of prejudice and injustice. But now he was forced to confront the possibility that she was capable of change, that even the most deeply ingrained biases could be challenged and overcome. Over the next few days, Derek wrestled with his conflicting emotions. He spoke with Kendall, his trusted friend, who offered a different perspective. "Derek, I know this is a lot to process," Kendall said, his voice filled with empathy. "But I think you should consider Maggie's offer. It takes a lot of courage to admit you're wrong, especially in a situation like this. Maybe this is an opportunity for real change, not just for Maggie, but for the entire community." Derek considered Kendall's words, realizing that his friend had a point. He had fought for justice, for accountability, but he had also always believed in the power of redemption. Perhaps this was his chance to put that belief into practice, to demonstrate that even in the face of deep-seated prejudice, healing, and understanding were possible. He decided to meet with Maggie, to hear her out, and to explore the possibility of a different kind of resolution. They met at a quiet coffee shop, the atmosphere tense and uncertain. Maggie looked nervous, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Derek, thank you for meeting with me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here to listen, Maggie," Derek replied, his tone neutral. "I want to understand what you're hoping to achieve." Maggie took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I know I've said and done terrible things, Derek. I've been blinded by my prejudices, by the privilege I've taken for granted my entire life. But I want to change. I want to use my experience, my mistakes, to help others understand the impact of their biases." Derek listened intently, searching for any hint of insincerity, but he found none. Maggie's words seemed to flow from a place of genuine remorse, a desire to atone for the harm she had caused. He saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, a stark contrast to the arrogance and defiance he had witnessed in the courtroom. "I'm willing to work with you, Maggie," Derek said finally, his voice filled with a newfound sense of hope. "But this has to be more than just words. You need to demonstrate your commitment to change through your actions." Maggie nodded eagerly. "I understand, Derek. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to educate others, to share my story, to help break down the barriers that divide us." They spent the next few hours discussing their shared vision for a more inclusive community. They talked about the importance of education, dialogue, and empathy, and they explored ways to collaborate on initiatives that would promote understanding and respect. As they talked, a sense of camaraderie developed between them, a shared purpose that transcended their past conflict. Derek left the coffee shop feeling a sense of cautious optimism. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, that there would be setbacks and obstacles along the way, but he also knew that he had found an unexpected ally in Maggie, someone who was willing to confront her own biases and work towards a better future. The trial had been a painful but necessary experience, and it had led him to a place he never could have imagined. He had not only cleared his name, but had also found a path towards healing and reconciliation, a path that offered the possibility of transforming a divisive conflict into a catalyst for positive change. The fight for justice was far from over, but Derek knew that he was no longer alone in the struggle. He had found a partner in the most unlikely of places, and together, they would work to create a community where everyone felt valued, respected, and heard. In the aftermath of the trial and Maggie's surprising apology, Derek Lawson found himself navigating unfamiliar territory. He'd anticipated the relief of vindication, the satisfaction of justice served, but he hadn't foreseen the complex emotions that would accompany his victory. The public scrutiny gradually faded, replaced by a cautious curiosity from the community. People watched him, waiting to see what he would do next, how he would use his newfound platform. He felt the weight of their expectations, the responsibility to live up to the image of the principled lawyer who had challenged prejudice and won. His relationship with Maggie evolved from animosity to a tentative alliance. Their initial coffee shop meeting had been the first step in a long and arduous journey toward reconciliation. They met regularly, sometimes in public, sometimes in the privacy of Derek's office, discussing their shared vision for a more inclusive community. Their conversations were often difficult, filled with uncomfortable truths and painful reflections on the past. But they persevered, driven by a shared desire to heal the wounds that had divided them and to create a better future. Maggie's transformation was gradual but undeniable. She began attending community meetings, actively listening to the concerns of those she had once dismissed. She volunteered at local organizations, working alongside people from diverse backgrounds, learning from their experiences and challenging her own preconceived notions. She even started a blog, sharing her journey of self-discovery and encouraging others to confront their own biases. Her actions spoke louder than words, demonstrating a genuine commitment to change that surprised and impressed even her harshest critics. Derek, initially wary of Maggie's sincerity, found himself gradually warming to her efforts. He saw the genuine remorse in her eyes, the humility in her demeanor. He recognized the courage it took to confront her own prejudices, to dismantle the beliefs that had shaped her worldview for so long. He began to see her not as the antagonist she had once been, but as a complex individual struggling to find her way in a world grappling with issues of race and equality. Their collaboration began with small steps. They co-hosted a community forum on diversity and inclusion, inviting speakers from various backgrounds to share their perspectives. The event was a success, drawing a large and engaged audience eager to participate in the conversation. Derek and Maggie fielded questions from the audience, their responses thoughtful and insightful, demonstrating their shared commitment to fostering understanding and respect. They then partnered with local schools, developing workshops and educational programs designed to address issues of prejudice and discrimination. They spoke to students about the importance of empathy, critical thinking, and standing up for what's right. They shared their personal stories, their voices resonating with the young people who listened intently, absorbing their message of hope and reconciliation. As their work gained momentum, Derek and Maggie found themselves facing new challenges. Some community members remained skeptical of Maggie's transformation, questioning her motives and accusing her of seeking redemption for selfish reasons. Others criticized Derek for collaborating with someone who had once targeted him, accusing him of betraying the community he had fought so hard to protect. Derek and Maggie addressed these criticisms head-on, acknowledging the validity of the concerns while emphasizing their shared commitment to creating positive change. They explained that true reconciliation required forgiveness, understanding, and a willingness to move beyond the past. They emphasized that their collaboration was not about condoning Maggie's past actions, but about creating a future where such actions would no longer be tolerated. One evening, after a particularly challenging community meeting, Derek and Maggie sat in his office, reflecting on the progress they had made and the obstacles they still faced. "It's not easy, is it?" Maggie said, her voice laced with weariness. "Changing people's hearts and minds." Derek nodded, his gaze fixed on the cityscape outside his window. "No, it's not, but it's worth fighting for." "I never thought I'd be working alongside you, Derek," Maggie admitted, a faint smile playing on her lips. "After everything that happened." Derek smiled back, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Me neither, Maggie. Me neither." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, a shared understanding passing between them. They had come a long way, from adversaries in a courtroom to allies in a shared struggle. They had found common ground in the most unlikely of circumstances, and their partnership had become a symbol of hope and reconciliation for the entire community. As the weeks turned into months, Derek and Maggie's work continued to gain momentum. They established a foundation dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion, providing resources and support to individuals and organizations working to create positive change. They became sought-after speakers, sharing their story at conferences and events across the country, inspiring others to confront prejudice and embrace the power of reconciliation. Derek found a renewed sense of purpose in his work, a deeper understanding of the complexities of justice and equality. He had not only cleared his name, but had also discovered a new path, a path that led him beyond the courtroom and into the heart of the community. He had found a way to transform a personal struggle into a catalyst for positive change, and he knew that his journey had just begun. One crisp autumn evening, a year after the trial that had shaken their community, Derek and Maggie stood side by side at the podium, addressing a packed auditorium. They were receiving an award for their work in promoting diversity and inclusion, their partnership a testament to the transformative power of reconciliation. Maggie spoke first, her voice clear and steady, her words resonating with the audience. "A year ago, I stood in a courtroom, my reputation tarnished, my world shattered. I was lost, blinded by my own prejudices. But through the grace of second chances and the unwavering commitment of Derek, I found my way back. I learned that true strength lies not in clinging to outdated beliefs, but in embracing the opportunity to learn and grow." The audience applauded, their appreciation palpable. Derek then stepped forward, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him. "This journey hasn't been easy. It's required honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But the rewards have been immeasurable. We've learned that even in the face of deep-seated division, healing and understanding are possible. We've discovered that true justice lies not just in holding people accountable for their actions, but in empowering them to change, to become agents of positive transformation." Their words hung in the air, a powerful message of hope and reconciliation. As the applause subsided, Derek and Maggie exchanged a knowing glance, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had forged. They had come a long way, from adversaries to allies, their shared journey a testament to the transformative power of forgiveness and understanding. Later that evening, as they celebrated their award with friends and colleagues, Derek raised his glass in a toast. "To second chances," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "to the power of redemption, and to the belief that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail." Maggie smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "To new beginnings," she added, her voice soft but firm. "To building bridges, breaking down barriers, and creating a world where everyone feels valued, respected, and heard." They clinked their glasses, the sound a symbol of their shared commitment to a brighter future. The journey had been long and arduous, but they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to make a difference. They had found their purpose, not just as lawyers, but as advocates for change, their voices united in the pursuit of justice and equality. And as they looked out at the faces of those who had supported them along the way, they knew that their work had just begun. The fight for a more just and equitable world would continue, and they would be there, side by side, leading the charge. The final rays of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, casting a warm glow over the city. Derek stood on his balcony, overlooking the bustling streets below, a sense of peace washing over him. He had faced his demons and emerged victorious, his spirit unbroken, his resolve strengthened. He had learned that true strength lies not in the absence of fear, but in the courage to confront it, to embrace the vulnerability that comes with being human. He had discovered that the greatest victories are not won in courtrooms, but in the quiet moments of reflection, in the shared spaces of understanding, and in the unwavering belief that a better world is possible. And as he gazed at the horizon, a faint smile played on his lips. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. He had found his voice, his purpose, and his place in the world. And that, he realized, was all that truly mattered. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.